Hello there, amazing viewers and subscribers, and a big, wonderful, happy 60th anniversary to our beloved favourite TV show of all time, Doctor Who. Now, I've been a Doctor Who fan since basically I was about 3 years old when I started watching it with my dad, and we watched Death to the Daleks. And that was my very first ever introduction to the universe of Doctor Who. And I have been a massive fan ever since. Encountered some of the amazing actors behind the show like Peter Davison, Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, Paul McGann, Nicola Bryant, Janet Fielding, Sophie Aldred, Catherine Stewart, Dan Starkey, and David Bradley and David Gareth Lloyd, for example. So I thought to celebrate 60 years of Doctor Who, I kind of want to did this big, massive special video about it, going through all the years basically from the show, from iconic ones. And of course today it is not just Doctor Who's 60th anniversary, it is the 10th anniversary as well to the 50th anniversary special, The Day of the Doctor. As you can see, I've got a wonderful poster celebrating Day of the Doctor up here. I just absolutely genuinely love that story, but I kind of want to talk about some of the Doctor's quite epic kind of moments in the show. I mean, considering that all of the Doctors are basically at the side of me, and people know that my favourite Doctor is of course Mr. Tom Baker, but there's so many things I just wanted to talk about with it being the show's 60th anniversary, going through each of the Doctors and what they brought into it, and some of my favourite stories out of the whole 60 years genre of Doctor Who. I absolutely just think the franchise is absolutely amazing. So at the side of me, you can also see my new background with my Target box on the side of me. We have my cosplay stand, coach stand at this side of me. So you see a bit of the hat and a little bit of the cosplays. And of course, I got a cyber head above the door, and I got a Jeju helmet above the door as well. So Doctor Who has been an absolutely fantastic TV show from the very word beginning, all the way back 1963, 60 years ago, with the very first story actually airing, which was of course The Unearthly Child, aka the pilot. I just have to be honest with you, that episode was absolutely amazing. I absolutely loved the way how I have watched it so many times over the last couple of years, mainly because it is a great jumping on point to introduce everybody into the world of Doctor Who, where we go into the junkyard of Totter's Lane, and of course we encounter the first Doctor, played by William Hartnell. Now, William Hartnell's portrayal as the Doctor, some people don't like him because they think he's too dark in some scenes, and to be honest with you, I actually do quite enjoy Hartnell. Yes, I can't really put him any higher on the list because, yes, he is the original Doctor, but the way the show has progressed over the last 60 years, we've had so many iconic Doctors. I mean, Hartnell's got so many iconic stuff himself. I mean, this is the man that stood up to the War Machines. He defeated the Daleks 4 times. He basically said goodbye to his granddaughter Susan. He said goodbye to Ian and Barbara. And he's actually said goodbye to all of his companions, apart from Ben and Polly. Because out of all the Doctors, I think there's only 2 incarnations of Doctor that has had the most companions, which is basically the first Doctor and the 4th Doctor. And of course, basically the first Doctor did witness a few of his companions die, like Katrina and Sarah Kingdom in the Daleks Master Plan. The others he left Susan because she fell in love with David. Ian and Barbara wanted to go back to their own time, but they basically went back in 1965 instead of 1963. 2 years out, no big deal. You know, Vicky goes and gets married in the Age of Troy in the Mythmakers. Yeah, Katrina we just see die. Sarah Kingdom would just see die. Dodo basically leaves halfway through the story, and Stephen leaves in the Smugglers. And then of course the first Doctor himself just collapses on the TARDIS after watching Mondas be destroyed and regenerating to Patrick Troughton. But the first Doctor, even though he is a bit of a grumpy old man who basically could bash your head in with a rock that we see in the Unearthly Child, he is very, very cunning, and he's absolutely brilliant. And to this day, I still think that the Doctor carries a lot of Hartnell's expressions and stuff. I do see a little bit of Hartnell in some of the other incarnations of the Doctor that we've had during the time. Then, of course, jumping into the second Doctor, played by Patrick Troughton. Now, the second Doctor has got more iconic stories to me than the first Doctor, which is why he is my third favourite incarnation of the Doctor. Charlton is absolutely brilliant as the Doctor. I mean, he's very, very cunning. He acts like a cunning clown, but instead he's this really mad, dangerous person. And it's basically from this persona of the Doctor where he starts to interfere in other people's and planets' affairs, which is absolutely iconic for the Doctor. And of course, he encounters the Cybermen 4 times, where the first Doctor encountered the Daleks 4 times, the second Doctor encountered the Cybermen for 4 times, but he encountered the Daleks twice, because the Daleks were supposed to be taken out to over America to do this big massive spin-off, but nothing really happened, so they did return years later into the show. Patrick Troughton's time as the Doctor is absolutely brilliant and amazing. He's very, very childlike in some of his nature, but deep down he is the most dangerous creature in the universe. I mean, he's the most dangerous incarnation of the Doctor. As soon as he lands on a planet and he finds that something's wrong with it, he's there thinking, yes, I'm going to interfere, yes, I'm going to do something, and yes, I'm going to go back to my TARDIS and go to another planet and do exactly the same. And of course, this is the era where we have a ton of mostly like base Androseed stories, which are just generally fantastic. Then, of course, he is put on trial by the Time Lords for all of his crimes and interference, and he's then exiled into his next incarnation, played by Jon Pertwee. Jon Pertwee is the most fantastic Doctor people could say. He's actually my 7th favourite Doctor. I was going to put him in the top 5, but there are quite a few other Doctors I do enjoy. Pertwee's Doctor is the only Doctor I can actually ever think that would actually knock you on your ass if he thinks you need to. And that's by using Felucian Haikido. And then, of course, basically during the Third Doctor era, we are stuck on Earth for most of it. We have the Unit family with the Brigadier, Sergeant Benton, Captain Yates, and of course we have Liz Shaw, Joe Grant, and Sarah Jane Smith. But unfortunately for the Third Doctor, he does come across a lot of foes, because he is the 31st incarnation of the Doctor that we see on screen to come across the Master. And not just the Master, really, he has the Daleks as well. He's the only Doctor to not actually encounter the Cybermen during the Classic era in his own timeline. He does come out of the timeline into the 5th Doctor's timeline in the 5 Doctors, and he does meet the Cybermen there, but in his actual correct time zone, time period, he does not actually encounter the Cybermen, sorry. But the Third Doctor does encounter quite a few iconic creatures that have made a return in recent years, like the Autons, the Master. You know, he also encounters Axos. I really would want Axos to return at some point, I really do. And of course, he actually encounters the Santarans for the very first time, and Omega, who is the founder of time travel to the Time Lords. But Pertwee was absolutely amazing. It's such a shame his Doctor got radiation poisoning, and he had to go into his next incarnation, who is my all-time favourite Doctor, played by the one and only Tom Baker. Now, Tom Baker's Doctor, he has 7 iconic seasons, 7 years as the Doctor, and encountering a lot of new foes, encountering some old foes like the Daleks, the Cybermen, the Santarans, the Master. But he does encounter some new foes. He's the very first incarnation of the Doctor to actually encounter the Daleks' creator, aka Davros. And then he basically goes to the Gallifrey. We go to Gallifrey for the first time in the 4th Doctor's era. He does save Gallifrey from the Master, and later on he saves it again from the Vardons and the Santarans. And he also goes on the quest for the most powerful Guardians of Time, the White Guardian. He has to go and get down to the key to time to stop the Black Guardian, who wants to rule domination over the universe. He wants to, basically, the White Guardian has stopped on this mission with a fellow Time Lord known as Romana. And he is the only incarnation Doctor to actually travel with another one of his own people, apart from William Hartnell with his granddaughter. But, saying that, Romana too then does regenerate into Lyanna Ward. They have some good adventures together until basically she stays in E-Space, and he ends up basically getting stuck with a stowaway, and that is Adric, for 2 more stories. And then, of course, we do meet Sarah, Nyssa, aka Sarah Sutton, in The Keeper of Traken, and then, of course, Logopolis, we meet Janet Fielding, and that's the actual start of the 1980s era does kick off. But the 4th Doctor does have quite a few iconic companions. He travels with Sarah Jane, he travels with Harry, he travels with Leela, he travels with K9, he travels with Romana 1, Romana 2, and Adric. But the 4th Doctor himself is the most iconic one. I mean, would you like a jelly baby? His era is absolutely spot on and amazing and just pure brilliancy. Absolutely amazing Doctor, and I just absolutely love his era. He's my favourite Doctor, and I'm in the middle of trying to work out my next cosplay of his. Then, of course, we jump into the 5th Doctor era now with Peter Davison. And this is where the 80s do kind of kick off, because season 18, even though it is the very first season to be in the 1980s, it does kind of feel a little bit like a carry on from the 70s with basically Romana and K9. But when you get to the later half with Adric, Nyssa and Tegan, and of course he does go on to regenerate into Peter Davison, this is where I think the 80s do kick off. And some people think this is the point where Doctor Who started to suffer in the 80s because of Michael Grading. The Davison era, it's a very of a mixed bag. You got some iconic stories, you got some masterpiece stories, and then you got stories that basically are like, they could have been so much better. Now, the 5th Doctor, for me, I did a poll basically between the 5th and the 13th Doctor, and the 5th Doctor basically won this by a landslide, and I absolutely love that face-off, and I will be basically doing that video at some point. But the 5th Doctor himself does meet some iconic monsters. Of course, he meets the Master quite a few times, the Daleks, the Cybermen, Davros, the return of the Sea Devils and the Silurians, which are basically 2 iconic monsters from the Pertwee era. But the 5th Doctor has quite unique stories, and of course, the one alien people, one of the Doctor's villains of this incarnation, I do really want to return at some point, are the Tellarites. The Tellarites are absolutely these fantastic kind of reptilian alien design, and I would love to see them return. And of course, he does go and defeat this big giant snake, aka the Mara, quite a few times. And then he basically does end up losing Adric, because Adric then dies. Now, since Hartnell, the Doctor's not basically had a companion die on him. So this is the very first time since Hartnell, he literally had a companion that he witnessed the death of, and that is Adric, and he does kind of hold that as a regret. And then also from the Davison's era, we basically see him say goodbye to Nyssa first, and then he says goodbye to Tegan, and then during this era he does pick up 3 new companions as well, like Chameleon, Tarlo and Perry. Perry does stay and go on with his next incarnation, but he does say goodbye to Adric, Nyssa, Tegan, Tarlo and Chameleon, even though he does have to kill Chameleon himself by using the Master's tissue manipulator. And he does get basically infected with poisoning by Spectroxoxamia, which basically just needed to destroy the regeneration process, but he still makes it into his next incarnation, played by Colin Baker. Now, Colin Baker, he is a fantastic Doctor. He is actually the 6th Doctor, but he's actually my 6th favourite Doctor. I have put him over Pertwee because of season 22. Season 22 is an amazing season. Now, this Doctor basically has one bad story in his very first appearance, and that is the Twin Dilemma. I absolutely do not enjoy the Twin Dilemma. It's not a great story. It's absolutely a pile of crap. But he does have a fantastic very first season, battling against the Cybermen, Daleks, Santarans, the Master, having the Irani, encountering 2 new villains, aka the Borad and Syl. And of course, when you get to Trial of the Time Lord, he's actually put on trial by his own people. Now, Colin Baker's era did suffer because of Michael Grading, because Michael Grading really picked up the season 21 story, Warriors of the Deep, to make him want to cancel Doctor Who. And no matter how good season 22 was, Doctor Who does kind of suffer after this season because of Michael Grading put it on an 18th month hiatus. But when you do get to the Trial of a Time Lord and you see the Doctor put on trial by the Time Lords once again, you've got the Valiant, who is the dark alter ego of the Doctor. We still need to find out which incarnation he still is in between, because he exists somewhere between the Doctor's 12th and final incarnation. So would that be between the Tennant and Smith, or a future point? We just don't know. But of course, we do kind of have some iconic stories like Terror of the Vervoids, and basically the 6th Doctor goes and bangs his head on the TARDIS console when the TARDIS gets attacked by the Irani, leading into his next incarnation, played by the 7th Doctor, who is actually my 2nd favourite Doctor of all time. Sylvester McCoy, he brings something new to the role of the Doctor. We meet the Irani. He has basically some iconic monsters in his first season, no returning ones, because it's every time he just meets the Caretaker in Paradise Towers. Then you've got the Barrowmen and Gavrok in Delta and the Barrowmen. And then, of course, you've got Mr. Kane in Dragonfire. And, of course, the Seventh Doctor on screen only travels with 2 companions, but in Big Finish, that is a whole nother time period. I'm sorry to say that, but that's a whole nother time period, and I will talk about that a bit more when I get to Big Finish side. I do quite enjoy the Seventh Doctor's era. Some of the stories in seasons 25 and 26 are absolutely amazing. I mean, for me to say what are basically the best stories from those seasons, you've got the Curse of Ferring for season 26, and of course, Remembrance of the Daleks. Now, Doctor Who was cancelled during the McCoy era, and basically McCoy did return in 1996 to film the regeneration between his 7th incarnation and to the 8th incarnation, played by Paul McGann. But unfortunately, we do not know what actually happened to Ace, because she never returned for the TV movie, but Big Finish has adapted that side of the stories. So I haven't really listened to all that yet, so I don't know what the fully whole side of that is, so bear with me. Then, of course, we get to the 8th Doctor, who is basically the short-lived version of the Doctor, with only 2 TV appearances and a cameo in the 13th Doctor's final story, The Power of the Doctor. The 8th Doctor has had so many iconic stories with Big Finish. My favourite of his is his massive series through Dark Eyes, where the 8th Doctor takes a dark, more turn because he's witnessed from what I've been told, he witnesses the murder of Lucy Miller, and that basically makes his Doctor kind of flip. I know, I haven't really listened to all of the 8th Doctor adventures, so please bear with me, because I did jump on at a very late point where Paul McGann basically has done over 300 and something audios from what he told me. But the 8th Doctor, he is my 5th favourite Doctor, but you're probably wondering, why is this Doctor my 5th favourite? But that is because of what I listened to through Big Finish. And I will do another video talking about how good Big Finish has been. And then, of course, we have the War Doctor, played by John Hurt, who made only 2 TV appearances, a cameo in The Name of the Doctor, and 1 full episode, The Day of the Doctor, the 50th anniversary, played by John Hurt. And the War Doctor is absolutely brilliant. The fact that this is the Doctor during the Time War, that he destroyed the Time Lords and the Daleks and destroyed Gallifrey. And, of course, it took him 400 years to try and change all that time by using all of the Doctor's past incarnations and 3 of his future incarnations, well, 4 technically. And then, of course, basically John Hurt does go on to regenerate into Christopher Eccleston. Now, jumping into the 9th Doctor with only 1 series, and again, thank God to Big Finish for giving us quite a few series now, because I believe we're actually on the 3rd series of the 9th Doctor Adventures. Now, unfortunately, I've only got 3 box sets, 2 from series 1 and then 2 from series 2. But, to be honest with you, I am kind of hoping I can work that out at some point and get the rest of Christopher Eccleston's run on Big Finish. The 9th Doctor is very, very hurt from the Time War. He's got this dark alter ego. He's part warrior. But he meets a human named Rose Tyler, and they go on quite a few good adventures by battling against Autons at first, then Lady Cassandra, then the Gelf and the Savine. He comes across basically his most popular and deadliest enemies. He comes across the Dalek that survived the Time War. And then, of course, that Dalek does blow himself up, and he goes on for another couple of adventures. He then meets Captain Jack Harkness, and then he goes back to Satellite 5, and then, of course, he finds out the Dalek Emperor has survived the Time War, and he's put a whole new race of Daleks. Rose then basically absorbs the Time Vortex, and then he has to get the Time Vortex out of her by giving her a bit of a smooch. Yeah, I know. But he gets the Time Vortex out of her, and he does kill him by leading into his next incarnation, played by David Tennant. And now, of course, this is the Doctor's 10th regeneration, 11th incarnation. You know, just trying to keep that in mind. So this version of the Doctor, played by David Tennant, basically has a good lifespan between 2005 and 2008. And, of course, during that time period, he travels with Rose, Donna, Martha. He encounters quite a few iconic monsters from the past, like the Macra, Cybermen from a parallel universe. He does encounter the Daleks quite a few times. He sees the return of Davros. He gets shot by a Dalek, leading to his next regeneration. And that, of course, because the Doctor basically puts his regeneration energy into his spare hand that was chopped off by the cigarettes in the Christmas Invasion, he is basically another incarnation, but he just kept the same face. It's still a regeneration. So now we're on the Doctor's 12th regeneration cycle, but on his 12th body. You know, he's actually on he's on his 11th regeneration cycle, but he's on his 12th body. And of course, he defeats the Daleks, ends up having a meta crisis, human version of himself. He ends up having to wipe Donna's memory, and he does go on for another 5 other adventures, or probably more adventures if you look at through the book, like through the novels, and of course in Big Finish as well. He then basically meets again Donna and Wilfred, and he basically comes across the Master again after basically the Master was shot in Last of the Time Lords. And the Master's basically been resurrected. The drumming in his head is basically the heartbeat of a Time Lord. The Time Lord's trying to end the Time War by coming back into our universe, but the 10th Doctor basically does stop him, and he has to absorb the radiation poisoning to save Donna's granddad, Wilf. And then, of course, that version doesn't really live long. It depends how you look at it. Through the TV side, he only has 5 adventures in his basically 11th regeneration, 12th body. And then, of course, he regenerates into the 11th Doctor, who is basically the 13th incarnation, and of course the 12th regeneration. So this is the Doctor's final. And the 11th Doctor has some iconic adventures over that past decade. Well, a couple of seasons. He ends up travelling with Amy and Rory. He ends up marrying River Song, which is actually okay. I don't really mind the River Song story arc, as long as it's not like a full-on companion like Ten and Rose. But the 11th Doctor does have a few iconic moments, like in the 11th Hour. He has the most brilliant kind of an opening story for his Doctor. He has a good character arc, like having to regenerate and goes in young Amelia Pond's garden. And then, of course, he does have to say goodbye to Amy and Rory when they get set by a Weeping Angel. And, of course, he has quite a few more adventures with River. And then, of course, he ends up having to go and look into Clara, who is basically the Impossible Girl, who basically jumps into his time stream. And he encounters her in the Asylum of the Daleks and the Snowmen. And he has quite a few adventures with that version of Clara, basically, before she jumps into his time stream. And then, basically, we get up to the Day of the Doctor, where basically the Ward Doctor basically uses the moment she opens time windows into his futures, where basically we have the 10th Doctor and the 11th Doctor meeting with the Ward Doctor, trying to stop the Zygons, and of course going back to save Gallifrey, which took 400 years, and of course you have all of the Doctors at that point, and basically one future Doctor, played by Peter Capaldi. And then, of course, we have Time of the Doctor, where the Doctor basically goes to Trenzalore, and he has to stay there for 900 years in a battle, trying to protect the whole town of Christmas. He does grow old, and basically he is about to die because he's got no regenerations left. And then the Time Lords, because he saved them in the previous story, give him a whole new leaf of regeneration cycle by giving him a whole new regeneration cycle. And basically he does end up regenerating into his next incarnation, played by Peter Capaldi, after a snap of the fingers. That means we needed that. And then, of course, we get into the 12th Doctor's era. Now, people don't really care for Capaldi, but he's my 4th favourite Doctor, and I'm sorry to say that. So he's actually my 4th favourite Doctor, Peter Capaldi. We go into Deep Breath with the return of the Clockwork Droids, into a Dalek, which is absolutely amazing. Him and Clara's friendship do kind of go through twists and turns. I don't really mind Clara in Series 8. It's more Series 9, where I find her very, very more, a little bit irksome, and the Doctor does actually become her bitch, technically. And I'm sorry to say that, but he actually does become Clara's bitch in Series 9 the most. But then Clara does die by doing something stupid, by sacrificing herself to save Rigsy, but she didn't even know she was sacrificing herself. But it's okay, because she's not really dead. She's dead, but she's not technically dead. She's stuck between one heartbeat and the next, and basically she's now travelling in her own TARDIS from Gallifrey with a Shilda. Yeah, very, very, as I say, it's more complicated, that side of the storyline is. Then, of course, the 12th Doctor does go and meet Bill and Nardole. Well, he meets Nardole first, then he goes to Bill, and basically they have quite a few adventures together, like defeating the monks, and of course, the going to Mars and trying to stop the Ice Warriors from basically killing a bunch of humans. The 12th Doctor's era was actually quite unique, so we do have Daleks and Cybermen. We actually have the very first female incarnation of the Master, played by Michelle Gomez, and that is Missy. And Missy is absolutely brilliant. And the fact that she's actually in all of Capaldi's seasons, she's in a lot of Series 8, she's only in 2 stories of Series 9, and then she's in a fair chunk of Series 10. And then, of course, she does end up meeting her past self, played by John Sim, the Master from the Tennant era. And we have 3 versions of the Cybermen, which is basically the Mondasian Cybermen, the RTD Cybermen, and the Moffat Cybermen. And then, of course, for the 12th Doctor's final adventure, he's trying to stop the regeneration because he doesn't want to give up who he is. He doesn't really want to move on. And then he meets basically his first incarnation self, played by the wonderful David Bradley. Now, David Bradley does try and do something different with the role. Some people do say Twice Upon a Time, it doesn't really do nothing for the first Doctor, but I do agree what they say. But to be honest with you, I just quite enjoy it for David Bradley's performance. He can't help what's actually been written on the script. He's just got to do the script. He's got to act to the script, and anyway, talking rambling, the 12th Doctor does go off to regenerate into his next incarnation, played by Jodie Whittaker, the 13th Doctor. And basically, because it's a new regeneration cycle, it's the 14th regeneration, 15th body Jodie Whittaker's Doctor is. Then, of course, basically, after regenerating into Jodie Whittaker, she ends up pressing a button in the TARDIS, and it just basically explodes and kicks her out while she's falling to Sheffield. We do have Series 11, which is very, very of a really not interesting season. It's got some mainly good stories in there, like The Woman Who Fell to Earth. You got Kablam. You got something else I can't remember from the top of my head that was actually quite good. Series 11 is very, very forgettable. Then you go to Series 12, and Series 12 you have the return of the Master once again, played by Sacha Dhawan, who is a fantastic version of the Master, and I just absolutely love his performance. Then after Sacha Dhawan, we basically go into Orphan 55, which is not a really interesting episode. Then we have Nicholas Tilsley's Nightmare of Terror. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely fantastic episode. I do enjoy that one. Futures of the Do, we end up finding the Doctor's got another secret incarnation that we did not know about. What is it with all these secret incarnations of the Doctor we just physically do not know nothing about? But that secret incarnation is then played by Jo Martin, aka the Fugitive Doctor. And then, of course, she goes back into a time stream. The Doctor carries on thinking, why do I not know about her? Why do I not know all about this stuff? What's going on with me? And then, of course, basically, we then end up having a couple of adventures where that just kind of gets dropped. And then you get to the finale where it's all brought back up again by the Master with the whole Timeless Child story arc. Now, I really think the Master should have been the Timeless Child, not the Doctor, because considering how many times the Master has died, come back, and died, and come back. The Master's died more times than the bloody Doctor has. So why can't the Master be the Timeless Child? Yeah, Chidnall. It would have made more sense if the Master was a Timeless Child, but not the Doctor, Anyway, never mind. Getting off that subject. Then, of course, we have my favourite Jodie Whittaker special, Revolution of the Daleks, where basically she's trapped in a Dadu prison after being arrested at the events of the previous story, The Timeless Children, by the Dadu. And then, of course, basically, Captain Jack comes along, breaks her out of prison. They go to Earth, find out that there's a whole bunch of clone Daleks, and the Doctor's got to call the original Daleks to come and take care of the Robertson clone Daleks, and she ends up sacrificing the TARDIS to basically destroy the original Daleks. Yeah. Then, of course, we say goodbye to Grain and Ryan, who are 2 of the most boring companions I can think of the Whittaker era, because they had that kind of series arc between series 11 and 12, and I really think they should not have come back for this special, but some people loved them, some people didn't. But then, of course, we go into Flux, and Flux is a fantastic kind of a season arc point, with basically you've got the Division, you've got Santarin's return, you have Daleks, and you've got the Cybermen. Basically, the universe has gone from one big massive thing to a small part of it, which is basically going to be a dread in the second special of the 60th anniversary, apparently. But then, of course, basically, after the Doctor's basically dealt with the Flux and everything else, they do go on and, of course, having a new friend in Dan, played by John Bishop, and he basically just end up travelling with them. Then, of course, the 13th Doctor has 3 more adventures. One where she's trapped in a time loop with the Daleks trying to kill her all the time. And then, of course, we have the return of the Sea Devils again, which is a fantastic story. Not many people will enjoy it. I just love it because it's got the return of the Sea Devils. because the Sea Devils are basically my favourite Pertwee villain. And the fact that we have the return of the Sea Devils, it actually is one of my favourite stories from the Whittaker era. But then, of course, we have the fantastic Power of the Doctor, where basically the Master has basically took some Gallifreyan tech, mixed a whole planet with the Cyber Masters and all that, and basically tried to steal the Doctor's body, well, the Doctor's regeneration cycle, and, you know, at some point. So the Doctor ends up in this kind of limbo, and then she meets David Bradley's first Doctor, Peter Davison, Colin Baker, Cecil McCoy, and Paul McGann. They're all talking to her saying that we cannot let the Master destroy our existence, we can't let the Master do this. And then, of course, she does get help with Vinda and Yaz, and basically they do get her back by using a hologram version of Joe Martin's Doctor. And of course, basically the Doctor is referred, but the Master still does the final blow and basically kills that version of the Doctor. She then has enough time to say goodbye to Yaz and Ace and Tegan and Kate and all that. So basically she just sees them for this adventure. Don't really get to say goodbye to them. She just spends a quick goodbye with Yaz, and then she goes to a cliff and then regenerates into the 14th Doctor, played by David Tennant. So yeah, David Tennant's played the 10th Doctor and the 14th Doctor. Well, basically he's played the 11th and 12th incarnation of the Doctor of the 10th, because the 10th Doctor had two versions, and then of course now he's playing the 16th version of the Doctor, the 16th incarnation, the, you know, the 15th regeneration cycle. Yeah, that's a thing. So anyway, David Tennant is now playing this new incarnation of the Doctor, who's basically, from what I've seen so far through the sketch of the Children of Eve special, it's very much like a little hashtag between the 10th Doctor, because he's got some of the 10th Doctor mannerisms, and it's just like, I think I can look past that and see how good the 60th anniversary is going to be. And then, of course, he is going to regenerate into his 17th incarnation with the 16th regeneration into Ncuti Gatwa at the end of the Giggle. Probably. And that is a quick thing for all the Doctors past the 60 years of Doctor Who. What is your favourite Doctor Who? What is your favourite thing of this past decade? And a happy, wonderful 60th anniversary to Doctor Who. I cannot wait to see the return of Doctor Who this Saturday. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how David Tennant's going to be as the 14th Doctor. Because, you know, the 10th Doctor is actually one of my least favourite Doctors. He's actually in 12th place for me. But the 14th Doctor might end up kicking some other Doctors out of the top 10. You never know. So yeah, let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Please do like, subscribe, share, and join me for more awesome Doctor Who content.